Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Sulur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a rising junior at Acton Boxborough Regional High School and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I've always been fascinated by the transformative power of technology. In this podcast, we will dive deep into 5 key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll be exploring the realms of cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, as well as the reshoring of manufacturing. These topics hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hi everyone. Today our guest is Leanne Wu, current CFO at Beauty Health, and starting a role as CFO of Toca Football soon. Hi, Leanne.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So first off, could you go through your career with us briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually went through quite a bit, starting with the consulting company Deloitte. Spent almost 13 years there, out of which 6 years really focused on merger and acquisitions, supporting private equity firm. And obviously, once I became a mom, that 24/7 lifestyle just wasn't sustainable. That's when I actually went private, starting working for BD, which is a fashion company, but also public, sort of went through a turnaround. And I was there for 6 years as their CFO, and then went even deeper to Gymboree, which is a children's brand. They actually have 3 brands. I was there for about a year, really helping them not only turn around this time, but restructuring. So they did file for bankruptcy, Chapter 11. That was a very intriguing experience, to say the least. But then, I was courted by SharkNinja, which is really a hyper-growth business, went from 0 to 2 billion in less than 5 years. That was probably my first taste of a growth business. And that was a very tremendous experience. After leaving SharkNinja, really learned a lot about growth and category creating. I actually got introduced to The Void, which is a virtual reality immersive experience company. And that was tremendous. And we actually did quite well until the pandemic hit. And wearing masks, and it just doesn't work, right? For a VR experience during the pandemic. Yeah. That's when I got introduced to Beauty Health, which was Hyperfacial back then, before we went public. 3 years later, obviously now we grow from 120 million to almost 500 million, from 1 brand to 3, from US centric to 15 direct countries around the globe. So it's been a tremendous experience, but it's interesting you ask my experience. If I just sit back and think about the common thread, I think I've always liked brands, and I like, global expansion. And more importantly, category creating brands, which are super relevant, especially in today's environment.
Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. Obviously worked in many different sectors and industries like fashion, VR, consumer electronics with SharkNinja. So what skills and experiences in particular do you think are the most transferable and impactful as you moved into the role of CFO for Hyperfacials?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think obviously all the fundamentals have to be there, right? To understand the financial health and understand the stage of the company. It is interesting, for me to start my career on the merger and acquisition advisory side. So it really allowed me to see technology company to manufacturing to financial service, understand the different life cycle and the type of businesses, right? And they can act very, very differently. So I think, a lot of the learnings and prepare me for the role, of Beauty Health is the common thread of growth and, scaling, especially on the global scale. How do you really optimize, meaning, invest a dollar for growth, but bring home profitability at the same time? I think that's critical, right? Especially in today's environment. that's really the common theme. And also having a great team is important because everybody is different. Some people really enjoy the engineering innovation side of the equation. Others might like, growth, and that's very, very different. So to find the right team that everybody speak the similar language and have the similar mission driven, dynamic, I think is really important. So, for me, those are probably the common themes made Hydrofacial interesting because it's another category creator. It's another growth and scaling situation. So it almost felt like everything I've learned in my career, I could, put it in use when I joined Hydrofacial.
Mm-hmm. So it's like the amalgamation of everything you've done so far. Yeah. So I wanted to go back to your experiences at Void VR, and I wanted to talk about that tough time during the pandemic period and how those experiences in crisis management prepared you for your current role at Hydrofacials, and considering the pandemic's impact on the beauty industry as well. And even Gymboree, you said they faced a bankruptcy, which I didn't know about. It's kind of shocking since I used to buy clothes from there when I was younger as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. That's why companies and businesses go through different life cycle, but crisis management almost become a requirement, right? Because if it's for anything to grow, there's a lot of changes in the environment. There's always going to be crisis. Like even when I was at BD, it's a 3 times of turnaround. Because if you think about a fashion company like that, you wouldn't imagine the amount of inventory management, the amount of data, because literally folks will be introducing thousands of SKUs every 4 weeks, right? Which is kind of insane if you really think about it. How do you make it right? Or when you have cyber crisis, and that almost become a common theme in a lot of these business. What do you do if somebody's credit card information does get stolen, right? Like, how do you really manage that? How do you communicate to the market and to your consumers? And I think the pandemic certainly take a toll on many people, right? Not only for the Void because it's extremely capital intensive. Because if you think about being a character in Star Wars, or all of a sudden you're playing The Rock or Kevin Hart's character, either way, when you're in that, virtual reality environment, just to produce the actual content takes millions of dollars. So, to survive pandemic, just purely on a financial support point of view, it's going to present its challenge. And by the way, even, with, Hydrofacial, it went through the same struggle during the pandemic, right? Because think about who's going to get a facial during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Many of the locations were closed during the time. So very quickly, the business had to shrink down. And then to make sure, how do you keep the core intact? And then, once the pandemic eased a bit, how do you get everybody back? So even, with Hydrofacial, we went through the same. Many of the providers actually have to go through shutting down, and then we were able to hire very quickly, once the pandemic starting to ease. So a lot of the skill set you learn, how do you deal with the environment, and that's part of the crisis management as you were speaking to. Same thing with Gymboree, right? That one was very extreme in a sense that, because they went through a transaction with private equity buyout and with a tremendous amount of debt put on them, right? They were entering into over $1 billion worth of debt. So it doesn't matter how well you are, with managing your inventory, managing your cash flow. When you have new competitors constantly coming up and everybody's promoting, you're almost a force. I'm sure it's no surprise for a lot of the fast fashion, but even in the children's fashion, you see these promotions constantly running. The business definitely take a toll when you're competing, right? You sort of race to the bottom. I think, a lot of times then the question becomes, what do you do in that kind of situation? How do you come back? And it takes a lot of discipline. And you really, from a CFO's point of view, there's a lot of managing, cash flow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. And you've done that multiple times. And I wanted to go back to Void specifically. So they were highly rated for delivering fully immersive hyper reality experiences. So how did you approach that business model and that value proposition in VR, in the VR space? And are there any lessons that you learned from that when it comes to Hydrofacials and customer engagement?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, right? Because at the end of the day, if we learn anything with customers are always going to be number one. And the experience you provide with the price you charge, the relationship have to make sense, right? And when you are dealing with a category creator like the Void, is $40 too much for a half an hour experience? But because it's so new and it's so immersive, right? A lot of times pricing is not necessarily the problem. It really then become utilization. So meaning if you're paying rent and you're hiring labor, how many people can you run through within an hour? And how many hours, especially during the non-peak hours, if kids are going to school during the day, how do you fill the space? And then how do you make sure there's enough content, to keep the utilization going? So I think that, as I'm now thinking through joining Toga football, for example, it's going to be the similar kind of question, right? Like when you're training kids to play soccer well, how many kids within the hour do you flow through to utilize your technology? How do you use technology so you can reduce the number of human trainer, right? But for folks to still get the similar level of experience. So really it all become a utilization question, which, it's the same actually when you think about beauty or with HydraFacial, because ultimately it's a service business where customers come in sitting in the chair, getting their facial services. So how many customers do you run through, but then what's their wallet share? While they're feeling really confident and comfortable with their estheticians, what other potential services or product can you market to them, right? That's really relevant to their lifestyle. So when you just peel back the onion to any of these companies, I think the common theme is actually quite consistent.
Yep. And talking about HydraFacials and their specific products and services. So they've patented a hydrodermabrasion technology. And can you explain how this innovation came about and how it adds value to your service?
Yeah, 100%. Have you ever gotten a facial before?
Well, I don't think I've gotten like a true facial, but I've just gotten like a scrub and face wash and cucumbers on my eyes.
Got it. Yeah.
Like the stereotypical spa stuff.
Get microdermabrasion. That's the most common manual facial people get. What that usually means is it can be very painful, right? Because you might have blackheads, you might have pimples, acne, and people usually will use their hands to, pop it. And you get pretty dinged up as a result, especially men. They couldn't stand pain. So when you think about microdermabrasion, a lot of that are acid based. So that also you can have allergic reaction, all of which can mean pain, right? Yes, you can have result that's really good for your skin, but it could be pretty painful. So hydrodermabrasion is actually utilizing the Vortex technology that's liquid based. So imagine liquid, with the Vortex, have the similar power, but without the pain, right? Because it can go quite deep with the suction. So imagine it almost like a vacuum, but for your face, but it's liquid based. So zero pain, but you really go deep cleans, and then your pore will be open up, and it's ready to put in serums to hydrate. So you can imagine after a HydraFacial, not only you're not dinged up, there's no pain involved, your face will literally glow. So often women can actually go to a wedding or go to an event or party right after HydraFacial. That's a huge differentiation factor. So believe it or not.
Yeah, I was thinking about actually going to my prom after getting a HydraFacial.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, you will look amazing. I guarantee it. But the two founders actually introduced microdermabrasion years ago, but they actually didn't do a good job putting the patent IP together. So as a result, when they then, use the smoke vacuum technology after plastic surgery, for example, you wanted to use the suction to take away the debris. They really use that technology as a base to expand it into hydrodermabrasion. That become a category by its own.
Mm-hmm. And how frequently do people come back for a HydraFacial?
That's a great question. With any business, you always have super consumers, right? These are the ones that are very loyal to the brand. So they usually come once a month. And to my surprise, actually, I was just in China back in July. A lot of these Asian market, either being South Korea or Japan or China, they actually get it twice a month. So these are the super consumers. But on average, folks get hydrofacial treatment once a quarter.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's relating back to your business model, right? That's how you keep money flowing in. But I also wanted to ask, how do you get new customers? Like, do you advertise at all?
Yeah, I think that's another important point, right? Because it's actually a B2B business. If you think about it, hydrofacial sells these medical device to providers. Yeah. So hydrofacial doesn't go directly to B2C, right? Because it doesn't own spas or any of these locations. But it's very unique as an omni-channel because you can get a hydrofacial from plastic, from dermatologists, from medical spas, but you can also get hydrofacial from hotels, from casinos, from cruise line, or from Sephora. So it's actually truly omni-channel. So in that vein, marketing is important. We used to joke about hydrofacial, just like SharkNinja to some degrees, right? You're being radically generous, even though you're B2B business, but you invest in both education and also in marketing. Because education, why? If you think about why hydrofacial can be omni-channel, is because it really educates the esthetician. So estheticians are the common theme because the esthetician can go from one spa to another. But if you really educate them when they graduate from beauty school, you talk to any given esthetician, you'll be like, who went to a good beauty school? Nobody would really raise their hand, right? Because a lot of times you can learn the technical skill, but nobody really teach you how you run your business, how do you do your marketing, how do you do upsell, right? So I think hydrofacial actually play a pretty important role in terms of being an educator. And that indirectly is marketing. Because once you teach them how to fish, then you can actually teach them how to do digital marketing. You don't have to do it yourself. Your esthetician will do it on your behalf. But then you invest them in education instead. But in addition to that, you can always engage in marketing. So you can see, we've been doing a relatively good job in terms of engaging in celebrities because they have the loudest, voice out there. But also you gain credibility because you become the true voice for plastic surgeons or dermatologists, because then you have the medical voice combined with a very organic, esthetician's voice in addition to celebrity. So then you kind of almost capturing the entire golden triangle.
Yep. Thank you. That's really insightful. So I wanted to go back to what you said about the specific serums for hydrofacials and how they pertain to different skin types and different needs. So what's your criteria for a successful product, and how do you approach the development of these serums?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question, right? Because that's another thing that's very unique about hydrofacial. Not only is omni-channel, but it also is truly a product for everyone. So, you can start as young as 12 or 14, right? Because it's so gentle in terms of cleansing. But when you really think about the true differentiation factor, it's not just the Vortex technology clean, because that can be applied consistently to everyone. But it's actually the last step in terms of putting the serum back into the face, right? Because when you think about regular lotions and potions, it just stays on the surface. It doesn't really go underneath. Remember we said when you use the Vortex technology, you open up the pore. So then when you put the serum back in, it can be that much more effective. So then it becomes, what is the innovation pipeline in terms of different skin type? So what's unique about hydrofacial is the partnership, right? Because we don't have to invest a lot of dollar in innovation. Some of these skincare, it can take months, 12 to 18 months to really come to a novel skincare ingredient. But by partnering, you sort of shortcutting some of the innovation timing. But at the same time, whatever is the hottest trend, whatever is the best technology, you can actually bring it to the consumers. And also because of the fact now we're in 18 direct country, but then indirectly we're in 90 country, different skin might require different things. When I was in China, for example, a lot of them have very sensitive skin and they care so much more about brightening or, how do you make sure if you're in Beijing, winter time is really cold, right? And you can have the thick hydration. It feels really rich and protect the skin. But while you're in Shenzhen, it's always hot, just like in Singapore. How do you make sure then, it's clean in a way and then you don't have this rosacea issue or something that's hot weather created issues, right? So I think the key there is localization and then make sure we're partnering with the right innovative folks to introduce the newest ingredient. But don't get me wrong, the company itself also, have its own innovation pipeline and, kind of build its own unique technology when it comes to serums as well.
Yep. It's really awesome to think about. You guys are in 90 countries and there's a specific need, even multiple specific needs per country, depending on where you are in that country. Like you said, different places in China.
Yeah.
And how you guys figure out different solutions
too, right? Have different requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So talking about the impact of hydrofacials, it's not just about skincare. Like you said, on the service side, it could also be about education. And on the consumer side, it's about wellness as well. So how does the psychology of beauty and self-care factor into your business model? And how do you think it sets you apart from your competitors?
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant question because ultimately, when you think about the slogan for hydrofacial, we always say face life, face first, right? And especially after the pandemic, your face is the digital business card. It's also the first thing, you interact with the world, especially it become much more digital nowadays. I think confidence is the name of the game, right? Regardless, I think we're much more aware, not only about our mental health awareness, but also how do we show up? I think, beauty sometimes is not just skin deep, right? It actually goes way deeper because that's the first, expression you show to the outside world. And, it's especially so during the pandemic and coming out of pandemic. I think that's what makes hydrofacial so unique is that community we build, what we call the Hydrofacial Nation. So it's truly a community that's uniting providers with estheticians, with consumers, because we care, about each other, right? And how do we all, feel good about ourselves and feeling confidence? I think that truly sets us apart because it's not only personalized and it truly is omni and it can be applicable to everybody. And when you think about what beauty means in terms of confidence, I think that goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that all adds up into you guys expanding to 90 different countries, 30,000 locations. And I don't think people understand how incredible that is, especially in what was it, like 3 years you guys did that? So could you walk us through the strategic decision making that took place to be able to expand that much in such a short amount of time and enabled this level of global reach?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And then the market is interesting too. I think a lot of times with business is also timing, right? We just went through a huge cycle in terms of top line growth. If you really think about being a category creator, able to really invest a dollar into growth, you don't always get to enjoy it, right? Because right now the market, when you think about it, is shifting much more to value. It's great to focus on profitability, but when you are creating a category, that profitable land grab becomes so important, right? Because when you run that fast, when you have a community build, the barrier of entry the hurdle become that much higher. So it sets you apart from your competition. I do believe we were quite lucky. The fact that, we were able to go public, we were able to raise a fund, not only from going public, but also we raised almost $1 billion through convertible debt because the market was ripe for that. That really benefit us in terms of growing quickly because ultimately, when I say we invest in infrastructure, it's always people, process, and system. The number one is actually people. Do you have a good sales team? Do you have a great marketing team? Which country do you really choose? How do you really balance out between your own, direct market versus distributor? It's the same as how when you think about Starbucks, think about own their stores versus franchise or McDonald's, right? There's an element of do you buy speed or do you really own, the expertise and how do you do your practice, or is that a combination? So we initially went through more of a profitable, land grab in terms of working through distributors. That's why we were able to go to 90 countries fairly quickly because then you build your trusted distributor they really invest in their own dollar. It's almost like a franchisee-ish model. But obviously, as you perfect, how do you build a community and they will copy you. Over time, this is when we went through the exercise of taking back 4 of our distributor back to direct. Because when you think about a country like China or Japan or South Korea, or European market, whether it be UK or Germany or Spain or France, some of these larger beauty market, it's actually better to own it and to really cement your relationship with the provider versus 100% rely on a distributor, because then by definition, the distributor's goal is to sell whatever is in their bag. So you're just part of the equation. Whereas if we're truly building a brand, truly building that connection and teaching the providers and estheticians how to provide the service to the best of their ability, you almost really need that investment and require that connection point. So that's why our strategy, and thanks to the market, really allow us is to buy speed and also be able to build these, anchor markets in the right location. And then from there, you can kind of enroll the rest of the distributor to roll out your model. I think that's really part of the reason why we were able to, accomplish that fairly quickly. And it's also a tried and true playbook, right? Because once you kind of have your tried and true way of educate market, 80% of our marketing are done by our providers, but then we invest upfront on education. I think that's really the secret sauce. When you have that flywheel and you just kind of go deep into one region, then expand from there. I think that accounts for part of the success.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I just wanted to build upon that for the last question. So you've already talked about it a little bit. What business strategies and offerings do you have in these other countries, and what unexpected lessons have you learned from branching out to so many different places?
Yeah, execution eats strategy for breakfast. At the end of the day, it always boils down to execution. And when we are running that fast, and when you are going into so many countries, I think the biggest risk is really that execution risk, right? And a lot of times to win the market, might be easier if you change it from a distributor to direct, because you already have the baseline set. We actually find it easier to lift and win if you do it that way versus when you build it from scratch. Like South Korea, for example. It's actually a pretty tough market because it's quite crowded when it comes to beauty and brand. And then what price point do you put together? So a lot of the learnings is very country by country, location by location. And again, everything actually does go back to people. Are we hiring the right leader in the right market? And that determines a lot. And it's actually boiled down to mindset. You would appreciate a growth mindset is actually very different than, let's say, a turnaround mindset or a mature business mindset or a larger company mindset. Because when you think about building hydrofacial in different countries, it's almost riding a pirate ship versus a big, so when you think about the people you hire, either they're captain for a big warship or a captain for a pirate ship. It has a very different mindset. It requires you to be very agile, but, to think big, but then be able to execute and pivot quickly. So there's a lot of test and learn, but that alignment with, so how do you think global, but then act local? But then how do you make sure everybody's aligned? Those are probably the hardest lesson to learn. It all boils down to discipline and execution. And then you are what you measure.
Yep. So to end us off, could you go over your 5 key takeaways from our conversation today?
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? But I think for anybody, what comes to mind is self-awareness is really important. Either being you as a student, think about what do you want to specialize in to understand what's your strengths and find the right environment where allow you to learn and play to your strengths, and but then feel your quote unquote weakness. I think that's probably really important. And the same goes with companies. Companies need to be very self-aware of their mission, of their culture, what do they stand, and who do they attract. I think that's probably real number one importance, right? And the culture element. I think number 2, being aware of the market is actually very crucial. I think flexibility is key because the market shifts so quickly. You have to be comfortable with change management. You have to be able to pivot quickly because today's market doesn't reward someone or a company that's too fixed mindset, right? Because things just change too quickly. You have to be able to remain that flexibility. That's important. I think profitability is important. Obviously coming from a CFO's point of view, it's not often you come with a wave of really promoting top line growth only. A lot of times profitable growth will be the name of game. So you really have to think about how do you grow, how do you optimize, so then you're not, foregoing the bottom line just for the sake of top line. I think discipline and execution is very important. We joke about execution, eat strategy for breakfast. It's easy said than done. To have the humbleness and discipline to say, is there an execution failure? How do I communicate it? How do we, retrofit and pivot? How do we realign and really, get to the finish line? Is really important. Those are probably, and then, I'll leave you with what I really learned from growth company actually came from Shark Ninja. To have that breakthrough mindset, to have that outcome driven mindset, it's critical. I almost feel like it doesn't matter what kind of business you go in, to have that requirement for yourself and the company, have that clarity in what is the outcome ultimately we're trying to drive at. And then how do we, believe that impossible can be achieved and really rally everyone to achieve that outcome, I think is really important as well. So those are probably some of the takeaways for you, if it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Exponential Edge podcast. And tune in next week to delve into topics and, in this case, businesses that will see exponential adoption in the future. Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.